Okay, welcome everyone. It is so hard. I know I did it last time, but welcome to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. If you are not already a podcast subscriber, it is good this fall. I'm just telling you that it absolutely is. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that you guys can see what I see. I just had dinner. So, thank you so much for coming to or listening to the replay. If you weren't able to attend live, the replay of why positive thinking isn't enough. And really, I probably should not use an apostrophe, a contraction. I should say why positive thinking is not enough. I'm going to do that. So, if you are here live, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Where are you from? Have you read the book? Been listening in on the podcast as we're kind of doing a book club the way through the book all fall long. Would love to see who all is here. For the sake of recording, I'm not going to read off everyone's name, but thank you so much for attending. Well, I want to go ahead and jump in. This is this is the gasoline that really poured on the fire that had started. Napoleon Hill started with Think and Grow Rich, and Norman Vincent Peale was leading a great church at the time, and he took it to the next level. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking in 1952, and it sold over 15 million copies. And notice that this is one of the originals. It says Guide to Confident Living, a practical guide to mastering the problems of everyday living. And this really kind of ignited the fervor in our society. And so much of what we know today about self-help can trace its roots back to that 1937, 1950 timeframe. If you're a real nerd like me, then you know that there was also psycho-cybernetics in the 40s. And so there's just this wave of information that is being produced during this time to believe in positive thinking. And it continued for years and years and years. We had, Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and we had all of the people that contributed to the society's belief in the power of positive thinking. I became so enamored with the power of positive thinking that, because it really did change my life. But in 2017, I wanted to contribute to this literature. There were so many people that had their take and their story. And some parts of me wanted to be like, well, there's nothing new under the sun. But then the other part of me was like, how do you go from hunger and homelessness to all of this awesomeness? And so I wrote Be Freaking Awesome. And before the book came out, I had probably given the talk, I would guess 10, 12, 15 times. I was at workshops, I keynoted a conference, all of these different things, right? I loved talking about it. And quite frankly, people love booking me for conferences because Be Freaking Awesome is kind of a fun little conference session. Maybe the why positive thinking is not enough isn't as fun and playful. May have to keep working on that. But just as the book was coming out, so I'd been talking about it for the year that I was writing it. And as the book, a few months before it came out, I started having panic attacks. And these panic attacks were pretty intense. And some of the time they would be completely just catch you off guard. Like I would be driving down the road. And I one day was talking to my daughter on the phone. And she goes, Mom, are you running? Which, number one, is a hilarious question because rarely, unless you follow me and know that in 2016, I ran 12 5Ks. Besides that, I don't run. There are no lions. There are no bears. I will bike. I do not run. So for her to say, are you running? I guess it was the year after I had run those 5Ks, but I said, no, why? She said, you sound really out of breath. And I'm like, oh, really? So I just tried to like that. I would just keep pretending like nothing was wrong. And so the book comes out and I get the copy of the book and I hold it up for Facebook. And I'm so excited. You want me to hold that now? Look, be freaking awesome. I remember posing for the thing. I had written the affirmation in 2013, write the book. There was a whole chapter on addressing the fears. But after I held that book up for Facebook and smiled in the camera, I changed my little Facebook graphic at the top, the little header graphic. And then I took that box of books, put them in the closet. I didn't have a launch party. I didn't tell all my friends. I didn't try to get people to buy my book. Like, no. At the end of the book, I actually talk about how in the end of 2016 and 2017, I had started working on homelessness because I was so sure that if I had a book called Be Freaking Awesome and there was a chapter on address the fears and I had panic attacks, this was a logical algebra equation. Clearly, I am an imposter. Clearly, I am a fraud. And so since I have just spent all this money to get this book printed, I won't even say published, I got it printed. I got 100 copies printed. I could not possibly promote it. I couldn't possibly market it because it was clearly crap. So this took me on a journey. I already told you that I was working on homelessness and was actually pretty efficient because I was taking all of these like feeling bad about myself and I just channeled it into work. That was my aholicism. Work aholicism. That's how I liked to deal with all the I don't feel good about myself, was to work. And eventually that work led to a job that was fabulous for working on homelessness, not so great for being an entrepreneur. And I then, just after after a year of dealing with the pandemic, was ceremoniously or unceremoniously, pretty unfortunately, publicly fired from that job. And so I had to go on a journey because I was like, well, crap, now what am I going to do? I now not only have the imposter feelings from my first book, but now I have all of this crap and all of this grief and all of this stuff. And I'm like, it's time. It's time. I've got to get to the bottom of this. My therapist had been working with me for a couple of years on my anger issues. I was like, I need to know why I'm angry all the time. She goes, oh, you have unresolved grief. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Literally, who argues with their therapist for 2 years? I will say, in my defense, I typically went to my therapist just when things got bad. So, 3 or 4 times a year. No, it's not grief. No, it's not grief. So I texted her and said, all right, let's talk about this grief thing. And what I had to do is I had to go back all the way to the beginning. I had to understand what motivates me. Like, how does that work? Like, how does your normal brain work? And I've always been intrigued by brain workings, but now I really dug in. And I had heard of the motivational triad before, but now I really, really dug in. And I started learning more about the motivational triad. Maybe you haven't heard of it, but this is in the primitive parts of our brain. So this is the part of our brain that is, they say, early biology. The lizard part of your brain, the monkey part of your brain, if you will. This is the part that logic need not apply. It is designed for one function, one thing. Only one thing. The motivational triad is designed to help you survive. That's it. I don't know about you, but I want a little more in my life than survival. Can I get an amen? So let's dig into each one of these areas of the motivational triad. The first one is your avoid pain. Okay, so for me, what I learned, what I came to understand is that your primitive part of your brain says pain leads to death. And if you can imagine back on the Oregon Trail, if somebody encountered a mountain lion and the mountain lion attacked them and, clawed them all up, they get infected, they could die, right? This was legitimately very bad to have pain because that pain could lead to infection, which would lead to death. Okay. So you can see where this is good for survival, bad for going after your goals, because going for your goals is actually kind of painful. Like you have to face rejection, you have to face uncertainty, you have to face your imposter version of yourself, right? So avoiding pain is very challenging in getting goals. The next section is seeking pleasure. Now, the interesting, really fascinating thing about seeking pleasure is that a critical component of seeking pleasure is actually designed to really not just keep you alive, but keep the whole species alive. Like we're gonna need some more people around here when we get old to take care of us, right? So the part of our brain that is seeking pleasure is wanting us to procreate and continue to keep the species alive. Can I get an amen? So seeking pleasure. But also, we now seek pleasure in all kinds of ways. And it used to be that you had to, had to go out of your way to even get some pleasure. People didn't expect it. But now it's there's so much pleasure and so little satisfaction. And our third component of our motivational triad is conserving energy. So the reason why we need to conserve energy is because we need to have energy left to survive the mountain lion attack. Okay? So if you are out just running a marathon on the Oregon Trail, you're not going to do that. And then a mountain lion at the end of the day comes after you, then you are not going to have any energy reserves left to be able to fight that. Okay. And so also, if you are in a scenario where you aren't able to get food, because on the Oregon Trail, it wasn't just like you could go to Walmart, right? And on that, you had to conserve energy and make sure that you were as efficient as possible. So nobody was going to the gym because they used up plenty of energy just making a fire, right? And so these three things are the most critical thing for you. One of the beginning parts of understanding motivation. That is how we get from where we are to where we want to be. I wanted to be in a place where I could feel confident and I could promote my book. Okay. So to do these three things, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and conserving energy, our brain has to employ our nervous system. There's actually two parts of there's a lot of parts for our nervous system, but specifically, we're going to talk about our autonomic nervous system here pretty soon. And so if you are walking along a path and you have seen a thin, dark object laying in the trail, what's the first thing that you do? You jump back, right? Your body has a stress reaction that is designed to keep the avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and being efficient going. And so when you see this thin, dark object on the ground, you are going to jump back. You're no thought yet. You didn't even recognize yet what you were seeing. You just jumped. How many of you experienced that? Right? the thing of it is that then once you pause and you look and you assess, it's so obvious. This is not a snake. This is a stick. But already, doesn't matter. Your heart's jumping or your heart's pumping. You're breathing fast. You've set, your body had to send adrenaline to the muscles to cause you to jump back. All right. Whoops, look at me. Okay. So this is your stress reaction. Your trigger was the thin, dark object on the ground. And your stress response was your heart racing, your adrenaline going, your lightning fast reaction, no thought, just reaction. Bam. Jump back. And so what happens next when you're on the trail? What do we do? Oh, oh my God, that scared me so much. Oh my word, it scared me so much. Oh, we take some deep breaths. We get our heart calmed down. We get our breathing regulated. You probably don't notice, but your eyes kind of undilate or dilate. I can't remember. Your eyes aren't as tight focused on that problem area. Just opens yourself up. What you're doing there is your body is actually returning to homeostasis. And so your homeostasis, just like the name insinuates, it is home base. This is safety. When you are in your response, that is your sympathetic nervous system. We know it best, most of us, as the fight, flight, or freeze. I know, don't even start with me on the fawn or on the faint or on the don't even start. I'll tell you why. I mentioned this in the book. They're still researching all of that. And what I would like to propose to you is that those other responses are not based in pure biology. Those other responses develop from trauma. And trauma is something that happens to you that your body can't or your brain can't make sense of. And so we don't come wired to fawn. That's not wired in. And the way I can tell you that is look at antelope. That's not how they're wired in, right? Fight, flight, or freeze is a pure nervous system response. You know what? 3 years from now, I may be watching this. I may be laughing, and people are like, we may be like, look at how outdated this is. But as of this time, right now in 2023, this is the answer. Fight, flight, or freeze. That's your sympathetic response system, sympathetic part of your autonomic response. The homeostasis is actually your parasympathetic response. And you think about a paramedic, it assists you. Another way to think about this is your rest and digest phase. So homeostasis, you go back to a state of rest. You're not in an activated state. You're not in a triggered state. You're in a calm rest state. Yeah, I know you're laughing because you're like, yeah, no, that doesn't actually happen very often to me. Let's talk about our sympathetic response, our response, fight, flight, or freeze. There are situations like the thin, dark object on the ground that we need this lightning fast response, because if that thin, dark object were a snake and we were about to step on it, we need our body not to wait for conscious thought. We need our body to act to keep us alive. So while I hate getting activated to fight, flight, or freeze, when I am faced with a snake in a trail, I'm very, very happy for it. So remember, does serve a purpose, but when it's overactivated, that's when it does not help us. And when we don't have a snake in front of us, when we just have an email, or we have somebody yelling at us on Facebook, or there's a potential lion attack, we're not actually getting a lion attack, you guys. You could use a fight, flight, or freeze if you were getting attacked by a lion, but that's not really happening. Okay, so let's break each one down. So our fight response, we use this when we perceive a threat and our body thinks we can defeat the threat. So I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting and somebody says something and you have this urge where you just want to punch somebody in the face. And then the next thought you have is, oh, that's horrible. I'm not supposed to think that I want to punch somebody in the face. I'm a professional. I'm a grown up. Oh my gosh. And like, we're a little bit like embarrassed that we felt like punching somebody, right? Okay, I mean, we're supposed to feel a little something. Anyway, you could also feel just like tightness, and you're having to like clench your mouth closed, like, oh, I want to say something and not. If you ever gotten like so angry that you just want to cry, I hate that feeling. I'm so mad that I want to cry. Luckily, it's not the first response. My daughter were on here, she would be all telling you how much she hated. I remember one time she called me, she goes, I just want my tear ducts removed. They're terrible. I hate this. Anyway, your stomachs could be in knots. And you also could just feel super intense. This fight response, typically we would probably label it anger. That's what it feels like. And it's not anger. Anger's an emotion. Actually, anger's a feeling. Oh, whoopsie. Anger is a feeling. We'll get into feelings and emotions later. Oh, let's talk. You'll have to read the book to know the difference. But what we are feeling is our fight response. And the sensations in our body, this is what they feel like, those physical sensations. What does it look like in others? I thought this was super interesting when I got to researching your fight response. And so I know what it feels like for me, because right now I'm feeling all clenched, or I want to just punch somebody in the face. But I was fascinated by listening to how to identify it and really understanding how to identify it in others. Because, if you've been around toddlers, then you know that some of this throwing a tantrum is when they're angry or when they're in fight response, right? Because we don't get our way. It could also be, though, resisting. Like if somebody says, you ask them to take out the trash and they say, no, I don't want to. That resisting or blaming, complaining, disrupting. I know some of y'all are like, oh no, I have teenagers. Like, this is just Monday, right? But it could be that they are feeling activated. We're actually going to get into that in a little bit, why we might have a little more of that when we're teenagers and just as kids, right? So that's what it looks like in others. So they're resisting, blaming, complaining, they're disruptive. Teachers, this might be a thing that you can keep an eye out for, right? So the next response is your flight response. And your flight response is when your body perceives a threat and it thinks it can outrun it. So if you're an antelope in the African safari and there comes a lion, you're going to take off running fast as you can, right? And in what it looks like in us, it can look like, I'm leaving now, slamming doors, right? Literally leaving the conversation. Inside your body, the physical sensations that you are probably experiencing, you may feel fidgety or tense or trapped. You may have excessive amounts of exercising that you just want to constantly or exercising, feeling like you need to get away from everything. You could have your eyes dilating and darting, like you can't keep focused on one thing because they're darting all around. You could have numbness in your arms and your legs, Or opposite of numbness, they could be constantly acting, like moving your arms and your legs and your feet. And finally, you may not be able to sit still. Again, some of you guys like, those are teenagers. Um, but that's what it feels like for you. When it's in other people, then how it looks then is that they could be avoiding, denying, refusing, distracting, changing the subject, or like I said, leaving the room. Literally, like, I'm done with this conversation, or I'm going to go and, wash the dishes. I'm not one of those people that when I experience a lot of emotion that I like need to clean. I wish that was a response I had, but it's not. So it could be literally leaving the room, leaving the conversation. And the final response, the freeze response, is when your body perceives a threat and it believes that it can do nothing about it. So if there's that antelope running through the prairie and the lion latches on to your hindquarters, the first thing that antelope is going to do, play dead. And you know why the antelope is going to play dead? Because then the lion, the antelope. I got the antelope. I'm going to go back to my pride, my people. I guess they're lying. Anyway, I'm going to go back there and I am going to actually see if all my crowd wants to come and share in the antelope that I just scored. So goes back to the community, brings them back to the antelope. It is no longer there because it just playing dead. That freeze response is designed so that the antelope can lay there and hope that the lion isn't immediately hungry before he goes and gets his buddies. That's the freeze response. Now, in your physical body, what it will feel like, it can feel like a sense of dread, which is a weird thing to explain in physical sensations, but that just, something bad is going to happen. Like you look how my body just like, something bad is going to happen, right? You can feel cold and stiff and heavy or numb, like, which is funny, right? This is the freeze response. Of course we feel cold and stiff. Our heart can pound really loud. You could hold your breath without even realizing it. So if you're like listening to somebody talk and you do the, and then you don't let it out, or maybe not even, like you may not even do the, you may just stop breathing. And then finally, and this one I think for me is the most common, is when I get in that freeze response and I cannot think of a response. Like literally, I go right back to high school when those sassy guys would run their mouth and they would call me a name and I would be having a conversation and I would be, talking to them about whatever, and they would call me a name and I would, and when you can't have you don't have a comeback. Somebody's a jerk to you and you don't, and then like 10 minutes later you're like, I should have said so frustrating. And so when people say, why in the moment can't I think of the response to say, I'm like, well, thanks to your freeze response. What it looks like in others, also a little bit interesting, is they're looking like they are spacing out, going numb. They could be ignoring you. Again, it's very hard to tell with teenagers, y'all. Dissociating. So I heard a story the other day of someone that just was like going through the motions, and you would talk to them and they were like, wait, what? And they had no memory of the last 5 minutes. It just literally just left their brain. But it also could look like ignoring you. So those were the freeze response. Oh, also, what it looks like in others sometimes, literally falling asleep in the middle of an argument. So I know there's times when you are having an argument with your spouse and you're like, I am not even tired. It is like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm suddenly so tired. I just need a nap. Why are you yelling at me? And it's like, because you're in the freeze response. So intense, intense tiredness. And I didn't put that. I should have put that because it can also look like your husband falls asleep in the middle of his argument. Still, right? Anyway, so that's how it's supposed to work, right? You respond and then you go, ah, I'm safe. You go to homeostasis. Unfortunately, most of us weren't taught. It wasn't as simple as taking a deep breath. Most of us as children, we get these unpleasant sensations. We get mad and throw a temper tantrum because we don't get our way. We can't sit still. We feel cold. We can't think of a response. We have all these unpleasant sensations, and parents don't really know how to coach us through, more today than ever before. But this is mostly what we get. Quit crying. I'll give you something to cry about. Am I right? That is the response that we are trained. And so what do we do with all that? We have all of this emotion. You know, think about when you almost stepped on that snake and you all of that racy heart. And what if you were told, stop it? And you just had to like stuff it down. Well, our little kid brain is trying to figure out what just happened because our little kid brain hates this feeling. They don't like this out of control feeling. This idea of being told that all this reaction that you are having is wrong sounds a whole lot like pain. And remember what our motivational triad, the part of our brain that gets online very first thing to keep us alive, says pain equals death. So emotion is painful. So emotion is death. And in an effort to try to understand what happened so that we don't ever do this again, our brain likes to take these experiences and it likes to put them in a file cabinet. And we file them into some file cabinets like, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. And you may be going, Ange, this is a reach. Read the book. I promise I lay it all out. I lay it all out. And in our masterclass, we're going to do in a few weeks, we're going to go into much more depth about this. But the thing is that our reaction to these triggers, our society says it's not okay. We're not allowed to experience these very large emotions, these very large reactions. So we're supposed to suppress them and we're supposed to bury them. And how are we supposed to keep everything straight if we don't have a good filing system? And not only do we need a good filing system, but we also need a good file system manager. Enter the inner critic. And so you can imagine that your brain is a file room and you have all these file cabinets. I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes. I'm not lovable. I don't belong. And your inner critic is like, excuse me. I am just going to keep a log of all of these bad experiences that happened so that we don't ever do them again. Okay. So 7th grade, you stand up, in school, you stutter, everyone laughs, you were embarrassed by it. Your inner critic says, do not speak up. I do not have what it takes. Filing it in file cabinet. You're in 5th grade and everybody's having a sleepover and everybody gets invited except for you. Inner critic says, oh, this feels terrible. Terrible. We're going to file this under I do not belong. Because if we can keep this file system straight, We can keep track of anything that has happened to us that caused us pain, then we can avoid it in the future at all costs. And the inner critic's job is one thing. Just like our motivational triad, the inner critic has one singular job, and that is to make sure we survive. If being in community and not getting invited to sleepover and not belonging makes us feel left out, makes us feel pain, we're going to have death, then we're not going to care what other people think about us. We're going to push people away. That inner critic is so vigilant and so thorough. It just wants to keep you safe. And so it keeps up a constant dialogue, reminding you of the things that could go wrong and of the things that are potential road hazards. I mean, you guys, if you've watched Inside Out, Pixar movie, that little fear guy, I mean, constantly. I think fear guy represents the inner critic pretty well, actually. Well, maybe not. Because honestly, the inner critic will sometimes actually do some crazy things. We can talk about that another time. So when we are so committed to avoiding pain, that means we commit ourselves to avoiding challenges. We commit to fearing the unfamiliar. So we avoid the unfamiliar and we retreat from anything that feels new, that could possibly transform us, because that is dangerous. And danger is death. I know y'all think I'm being dramatic. I don't even care, because it's crazy. And we all think that the inner critic is just something that lives in our head and that everybody has it. I thought that too. I did. And my inner critic wanted me to focus super tight on the things that were going to keep it safe. But what happens is that means that we're constantly in this state of fight or flight or freeze, and we're not returning to homeostasis, especially as children. We're just not trained to go back. Now, do we learn to go play? Yes, but we're not going to play full out because we're constantly scared of what could happen. And maybe it didn't as a child. Maybe you're like, that happened a long time ago. That doesn't even impact me anymore. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Are you living to your dreams? When you are on a day-to-day basis, you're probably right. It probably doesn't impact you, because what you know, the job you know, the business that you know is very safe. It is known entity. But when you start trying to grow to be a better human, when you start to build a business, when you start to try to do a side hustle, start a new relationship, all of those things are super scary, because there is just a file cabinet room full of things that could be causing you pain. And you have all of these cycles that didn't complete because you were told to quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And when you do that, then the relationships around you become fraught. It's like everybody that is in your life is walking around the minefield that is your brain, and they are about to step on any minute now a landmine. And so you believe that these people are just pushing your buttons, pushing your buttons, pushing your buttons. Why do people keep pushing my buttons? Well, sweetie, the reason why is because there's so many buttons to push. There's so many things that your inner critic has decided are dangerous. Now, personally, I got tired of this. This is why I embraced the power of positive thinking. And I thought I could just positive think my way out of this. Ha 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 ha. That's adorable. Actually, I did believe it. 20 years. I'm a huge believer. Feel your feelings? Nah, I'm good. My thoughts create my feelings. I have control of my life. So therefore, I just need to take control of my thoughts. I just need to change my thoughts so I can change my feelings. No one can make me feel anything. I control my feelings. Really, really. We'll come back to that. So what I did was I just fully embraced this positivity. I turned my brain into a giant cheerleader. I could just constantly reassure myself. I said positive affirmations. I put little post-it notes on my mirror. We are all in. I was all in, and I could keep it going, and I could stay on track for days or weeks or months at a time sometimes. As long as I was reasonably well fed, reasonably well rested, and pretty stress free. I could believe the affirmation that I am enough. I am lovable. I have what it takes. When I was well rested, oh, girl, you cannot stop me. I could take full control and I could shape my feelings. However, I get a little bit hungry. I get real stressed out. I get to the point where I'm in a situation that is unknown or new or something that doesn't feel comfortable. And my inner critic came and knocked the cheerleader down and was like, excuse me, we need to stay safe here. This business of positive thinking and your I am enoughness nonsense. Thoughts create your feelings. Yeah, fine, whatever, except danger. And I am here to keep you safe. And that's what my inner critic. And so this constantly back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And honestly, oh my goodness, you never knew who was going to win. I wanted to choose happiness. I was so desirous of contentment and I wanted command of my emotions. But so often life would throw something at me and I wouldn't be able to stay in control of my thoughts. I would get triggered because there were so many things that my body had cataloged as dangerous. If I'm walking around with a belief I'm not enough, then if you say something that is like, are you sure you know what you're doing? Oh my gosh, you have just accused me of not being enough. The worst crime anybody can do is confirm the belief you have about yourself. If you don't believe me, the people that say things about you that you don't believe are true, if somebody said, Angela, you have a giant mole on the side of your face, I'm not going to be offended by that because I know there's no mole on the side of my face. If somebody says, Angela, I don't even know if you love your children, I'm not offended. You know why? Because I don't believe it. It doesn't make me mad. But this constant back and forth and back and forth. The inner critic is going to keep me safe. My inner cheerleader, you got it, girl. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Keep you safe. Let's prove you're enough. Prove you have what it takes. It was exhausting. It was absolutely and completely exhausting. And so, what's the solution? What I have discovered over the last few years is I have to employ my adult self to become my inner coach. I had to decide that neither the critic or the cheerleader could navigate this. This file room is complicated. We need a new sheriff in town. Okay. And to take charge of that mental file room, I had to learn to be my own coach. And the first task was actually to go into the file cabinets of my mind and to eliminate the limiting beliefs and to replace them with empowering beliefs. But hear me, it is not simply a matter of just throwing the files away and having to think that they are done. It is not simply a matter of deciding consciously, I am enough. That's what the cheerleader did. We had to go back to those feelings that got triggered, and we have to finish that cycle to return to homeostasis. We have to take the toxic waste dump and we have to clean it all up, and we have to clean it out, process the emotions. Now, the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing is that this doesn't take a long, long, long time. It doesn't. This process, I have actually been able to get people through some amazing, amazing freedom and results in as little as 3 coaching sessions. I started out with 6 coaching sessions and have gotten it down to where people can get some incredible freedom in just 3 simple coaching sessions. And what we do during those coaching sessions is we work through all of these core beliefs and we clear out. Is it permanent? Is it the end all be all? Absolutely not. But I'm telling you, you will get through a really huge amount of those. You want to go really deep, and we can go 6 sessions, and we can go after the first 3, work into the next 3, where we then begin to put you on the path to building your empowering beliefs. What I have found is that when I cleaned out those negative core beliefs and I filled my brain with the positive, empowering beliefs that I had had previously, or that I wanted to believe, the cheerleader wanted to believe I was enough. Oh, and it's kind of like, oh, you can't just paint a wall that is dirty, right? To get that paint to stick, you got to clean the wall first. You got to prime it. And then that new beliefs will stick. But until you clear out those emotions, then you can't plant those new beliefs. So, what my coaching process does is it actually helps you navigate through those. You don't have to spend years and years and years on this. You can actually go and walk your way through the maze with the shortcuts that we have found in this coaching process. And so I want to open it up to discussion and to questions. And in the video, we'll edit these out. So feel safe to let's go ahead and we'll wrap up the recording. Before we jump into the discussion and questions, just really quick, want to go over the core beliefs. These are the 7 core beliefs. I am enough. I am valuable. I trust myself. I belong. I have what it takes. I'm worthy, and I'm lovable. So those are the 7 core beliefs. You'll find them in the book. And also check out the website for some additional resources to plant these. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. I appreciate you taking time. I appreciate that you have all been so attentive, and I hope that you all continue to travel light.